Cool. So we're starting something new today. We're going to do a simple one-page resume website. This time with the base project that we're going to start off of, I took out more pieces. So what that means is we have to do more of the implementation this time, if that makes any sense. So as we go through, as people gain more and more experience, more confidence, I'm going to slowly take off more and more of the training wheels, if that makes sense. So that blog one we did last week, like I'm sure you realize a lot of it was already built in, and we were just like modifying pieces. I'm sure everyone understands that. So the more and more of these we do, like the more of those built-in pieces will be removed, because those are basically training wheels, right? And I'm going to slowly move more and more away, so you can kind of see how things are put together from the bottom up. All right. As usual, make sure you have an account on Turbo. It's free. Just sign up. We're going to use the Node runtime. Download the LTS if you don't have that already, and install that. And I'm going to open my terminal. And check your Node version. You can do that by doing node-v, like so. And I'm running 10.16. And then check your NPM version. And I'm running 6.11. If you don't have the same, it's fine. If you have like a higher version, it's okay.
No, mine's 13.
That's fine.
Oh,
it's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. And then make sure you have the Turbo CLI, sudo npm install -g Turbo CLI. Let's go through this again, one sort of element at a time. Most of you probably don't need to do this because you already have the CLI installed, but let's go through this one piece at a time, except the sudo. Don't worry about that. What is npm? What does it do? Yeah, manages your packages, installs your dependencies, among other things, but that is the most important thing it does. Obviously, what are we doing here? Install. The -g, who can remember what that means? Global. What does that mean?
It's installed on everything.
On your computer, as opposed to what?
As opposed to just the folder.
Very good. So there's basically two kinds of installations. Global, which is basically the same as installing like something on your computer, like hardware. It's on your machine, as opposed to installing a package locally, which is just it's only in that project. Do you understand the distinction? By the way, that's a Node thing. A lot of other runtimes and software environments don't work that way. For example, Python. There only are global installations. You're installing packages on your computer to run your Python software, your Python libraries. So Node is a little bit unique in that regard, which is the sort of double-edged sword. But anyway, so here we're installing the Turbo CLI. CLI stands for
Command line based.
right. And what in general, what is a CLI?
It's how Turbo interacts with our command line on the machine.
In this case, yeah, for the Turbo case, right? But CLIs are everywhere, right? Amazon has a CLI, Google has CLIs. What are generally CLIs?
Command line is how the terminal interacts with the, I guess like with the code, with the templates, with your whole project.
Not exactly, because we could do that technically without the Turbo CLI. We could still run the code. We could still run the project without the Turbo CLI. We could still develop effectively. So what do we need the CLI for?
Tell them to work with Turbo, like AWS is to AWS is
Right.
CLI.
So it's a liaison between your code and whatever platform you're using. So we're using the Turbo CLI because we're going to do what?
Deploy
On Turbo.
to Turbo.
If I want to deploy on Amazon, would I use the Turbo CLI?
You would use Amazon
Right,
CLI.
the AWS CLI, exactly. That's how these things, that's how you want to think about it, okay? So that's what that is. You can check the Turbo CLI version by just typing in Turbo version. That is the current version. Make sure you have that or higher, and you should be good to go, okay? So that's everything we're going to need for tonight and the next probably 3 sessions. So let's head back to Turbo. Oh, before we do that, just in case we forget, I'm going to do Turbo login on the CLI so that you're logged into the CLI as well. So do Turbo's login and then type in your email and password that you use to sign up for Turbo. And that way it'll prevent, only you can deploy your projects. That's called authentication, okay? So make sure you've successfully done that, and then we will begin today's project. Everyone got that? All right. I see Nicole, so I'm just going to pause the video for her. Hey, Nicole. Okay, so once you're logged into your Turbo CLI, again, make sure you see that pop up. Head over to Turbo and let's get started on today's template that we're going to use. So click on Gallery and click on Developers and search for Turbo 360 and scroll down until you see the logo right there. And again, as always, that's going to be the guide where I store all the template. I mean, you could even just follow this profile, and it'll just show you all the stuff I'm putting up and all that stuff. So, okay, so this is the one for tonight. So simple resume. Click on that. Let's click on View Demo just so you see what we're going to be working on today. So it's just a simple one-page resume. That's it. Okay.
So we're creating a site with the resume?
Yeah, we're going to work on this today. Okay, we're going to customize this with our own content.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's cool.
So click on Download Source and do what we usually do. So download source, and that's going to download a package.zip file into your downloads folder. I'm going to rename it right now so we don't lose track. So I'm just going to rename it Simple Resume. Okay, just do that first. Open that up. And here is the unzipped project. I'm going to slide that to my desktop. And I'm going to get rid of the zip file just to keep things nice and clean. Okay, so now let's open up the terminal, which I already have open, so you should already have that open. I'm going to change directory to the desktop. Okay, so make sure you're on the desktop. That's the command, by the way. I think I went a little bit too fast on that. That's the command. So change directory to desktop. And then take the folder that we just unzipped and moved over and open that up in VS Studio, Visual Studio Code, just by clicking and dragging it onto the VS Code icon, and that'll open up the project. Okay? And then I'm going to remove the node modules. Technically, you don't have to do this. It's just a habit of mine. I like to do a clean install. So the node modules are what? The dependencies, the packages. That's where they all go, right? The project cannot run without the dependencies, so I just remove them. It seems like a step backwards. It kind of is. So I need to do what? Reinstall them. So I go back to my terminal. Okay, make sure I'm in the project root directory. So simple resume, sorry. Okay, so here, make sure you're in the root directory of the project, and then how do you install the dependencies? Good, and that's going to install the dependencies, aka the packages. Those are found where? No. Package.json. Here is where the dependencies are stored. Literally, it's right here, right? Dependencies. So just going down that list and just installing each one. Okay. So that's it. So that's how it works. So when that's done, I'll have a clean install. I will have reinstalled the dependencies, and which means I can now run the project. So now here, if you open up package.json, you may recall to run a project, we always do what? We always do npm run serve, right? This time it's different. It's npm run dev. I did that on purpose because I want you to understand that it's not always going to be the same thing. So the way you figure it out is you have to go to the scripts folder and see what's on the menu. Okay. And npm run dev is a very common way of running your dev environment. That's like a typical script name. Same as npm run serve. So it might be one or the other, or some other name that some other developer came up with. But my point is, I don't want you to start thinking like it's like this every single time, because it isn't. So you have to use your head in terms of like, here's where I look to figure out, what I need to know, right? So here, it's not going to be npm run start. Oh, I'm sorry, npm run dev. It's going to be what? npm run dev. Yeah, I just said that, sorry. So npm run dev. And that will run the local server on port 3000, localhost 3000. So I can just copy and paste that over into the browser. And I should see the same resume on localhost as I did on the actual demo website. Okay, so it's an exact replica of what we just.
I have a question. Is there a way that I can delete that? I forgot to remove the node modules before I moved it over into Visual Studio Code. Is there a way I can delete it from Visual Studio?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I'm going to turn off my server.
Okay.
And you right click on that.
Right click. Okay.
And then just delete.
I'll just do it that way.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's actually what I do as well. That's how I do it as well. So
okay, and then just do the npm
right.
install.
Yes.
Okay.
Do that right now because it's the same process.
So you say go to node modules and
right click on it, just delete it, and then run the install again. And then make sure you run it locally successfully.
delete. Okay.
Okay.
Deleted it. All right. So remove the trash.
What do we need to delete?
Okay, so as usual, this is a Node, very simple, basic Node Express project with a couple things built in. A little bit less this time than the last tutorial, the blog tutorial. But this time, before we do any actual development, exploring the code, or any of that stuff, we're going to deploy right away. That's the first thing we're going to do instead of the last thing, which is what we did in the previous workshop. Because I want you to start getting used to the flow of doing local development testing, trying some stuff out, then deploying. That's a cycle you want to get used to. Okay, so first thing we want to do is head back to your Turbo site and click on your account page. And it keeps track of what projects you have downloaded, obviously in the downloaded tab. So you'll see on top is the most recent one that I just downloaded, right? What I now need to do is recreate the environment of that website on my account. Because keep in mind, the only thing we've done is downloaded some code. That's all we've done. We just downloaded a bunch of files. That's really all we've done, right? So we need to recreate the environment of that website on our account, okay? Because the environment has a lot of things that are like sort of specific to that website. So it's very easy to do. You click clone environment and just put in a name for your site. So I want to call it Dequan Resume. And then click clone, and it's doing exactly what I just said. It's cloning the environment of the original website into my own account on Turbo. I'm basically clearing out some space on the Turbo servers ecosystem where I can deploy the site. Okay, that's what that does. So once that's done, I've like cleared out a little bit. It's like claiming a locker in a locker room. Like that's my locker. That's where I'm putting all my stuff. That's kind of what's going on here. Okay. So once you get to this UI, that means you have successfully cloned the environment. Okay. Just give me a show of hands who sees that. Okay, good. So now what we need to do is connect our source code locally to that environment. Okay. So we go back to our terminal and we type in the following. Make sure you're in the root directory of the project. It's very important. Okay. And we do turbo connect. See how we're using the CLI right now to interface with the platform? But right now we're using the Turbo CLI to interact with the Turbo platform. So that's what the CLI is doing for us. And then it's going to ask you for your site ID. So you just grab that over here, copy that. Okay, you copy the site ID and you paste it in. It's going to ask for your API key. Copy that and you paste it in. Now none of this will work unless you're logged in. That's why I said make sure you're logged in. Okay? And if it worked, it'll just tell you that. It'll just say successfully connected your source code to your Turbo environment, which means you're good to go. You can just do Turbo deploy, and it'll throw up your source code into the environment that you just sort of cleared out, the hosting environment, the hosting space. So now we're doing a deploy right away just to make sure our hosting environment works and is synced up with what our local source code is. It should be the same. right? And then once we've confirmed that, now we know, like, okay, whatever we do locally is going to work on the remote. So here I have my deploy complete confirmation, and that gives you your address on the hosting environment. Okay, so you just copy and paste that over into a browser, and I should see the same thing, which I do. But this is now deployed. This is on the internet. We just published the website. Okay, it's good to start like this as well, as opposed to what we did last time, which is a bunch of work and then deploy. Because if you start like this, then you know, like, it's already connected. So whatever I do locally, I will reliably be able to push to the servers. This is sometimes called a push. We're pushing our code to the server. Okay, so that's a deployment. Who sees their deployment in the cloud, in the internet? Okay, so you're good to go, Tina.
Hold up, maybe I missed the CO. Let me try one more time.
Yeah, just you can just copy and paste with that. Yeah.
Copy too fast. Yes, now I do.
Okay, so you successfully deployed. Good, that's one. You got, all right, cool. Let's wait for a couple more. Okay, so right away we downloaded the code, opened it up, made sure it worked locally, and then deployed right away, which is good because then now we know that when we make our changes and whatnot, we know we're confident the deployment process will work, right? So that's great. So now let's dig into the code. So we have our package.json. I think we're pretty good on that for now. Again, this is a Node Express, very simple Node Express project. And we are going to work primarily in the views directory today. So the views folder holds what kinds of files? Templates, right? And templates render what? HTML. But yeah, that's correct. But the word template has a sort of a special connotation. It renders HTML in dynamic fashion, meaning that we can put data into the HTML dynamically. And then it'll render, like, the rendering result will be different based on the dynamic data. Okay, so we're going to do a lot of work with that. Basically today will be a lot of work with the templating engine and just sort of getting comfortable with how all that comes together. Does that make sense? Before we dig into that, just want to review sort of the flow. So remember, websites fundamentally are just a request response cycle. That's like the most important thing, request response, right? So we want to make sure we understand kind of where that cycle takes place. So if you open up the app.js, you'll see a bunch of stuff. Don't worry about it. We eventually will get to all this. But if you scroll down to line 22, right, what are we doing on line 22? Yeah, we're importing a route. What is a route?
Where the logical response takes place.
Yeah, where the request response logic happens. That's where sort of the magic happens, inside the route. So the request response cycle that I was describing a second ago, that logic happens in the route. In this case, it's called the index route. Right? It's not the same name as before. Right? Before we called it what? If you recall, before we called it the page.js route. That's where we did all that stuff. So now we're doing it in the index route. So again, the thing I'm trying to convey is that it's not the same every single time. You have to understand what to look for and what those things mean. Okay? What is the same is it's a route file. Right? Otherwise, it wouldn't work at all. So the route is where the request response logic happens. What are we doing on line 25?
It's going to the home path.
Right, we're setting the home path for that route. So routes are, how can I articulate this? Routes, which route you use is determined by the path.
Which route you use is determined by the path.
Right. Or which route responds to a request is dictated by the path. And that's how you understand that. Okay? We only have one path, the home path. This is a one-page site, so we only have that one path. So, it's going to have to be that. But if we had, many more routes and many more pages, you would see more of these, right? But with different words after the slash. The contact page, the about page, whatever. That's how you would interpret that, okay? That's Node Express, all right? So let's go. What that means is our work today, and primarily for the bulk of this project, is going to be in what file? Well, that's actually true. Before we get to that, though, okay, you're right. But there's another file that's equally important. Index.js in what folder? The routes folder, right? Because it says it right here. We're importing it on line 22 from where? From the routes folder. That's where we're going to find the file we need to begin. Is everyone with me?
No, can you just repeat it?
Yeah, sure. So we're importing the index route here on line 22, right? And we're setting it on the home path. This route is what's going to perform all the logic, the request response logic, because that's what routes do. They handle a request response cycle, right? Luckily, we only have that one route, so there's not much to look for. So we're going to have to find that file. Right? The question is, how do we know where to find it?
The routes index.
You got it. Yeah, just it's right there. Routes folder, the index file. So we have a routes folder, and this index file is what this is directly referring to. I mean, you could actually type in index.js, and that's really what it means, but most people don't do that. Okay? So when I open this up, I have a pretty simple route. I mean, even this was a little bit more baked in than I wanted, but well, it's not that much, so we can. This should look familiar, right? We have our get handler. Why is it a get?
Because it's receiving the information.
No, almost.
That's the language.
Sorry?
That's the language.
Requesting your R.
Sorry?
The R, requesting?
Yeah, that's correct. But why didn't I do post?
Because you're trying to get.
Yeah.
What I'm asking is, why is it a get? How do we know it's a get?
Because it's reading what's.
Not quite. So remember, there are 4 main kinds of HTTP requests.
So we're not. You're not. It's not.
Well, let's go through it one at a time. So there's 4 main types of HTTP requests. There's a lot more than that, but there's 4 that really matter. What are they?
Get, post, update, and delete.
Right. Get, post, update, or put is the update, and delete. That's correct. When I go on a browser and I type in www.whatever.com, what kind of request am I making? A get request. That's why this is get. Okay. That the browser makes get requests. Okay?
So it's not just that we're reading, it's because the browser is.
Yeah, the first part isn't even at all, has no relation. It's because the browser makes get requests. Right, so when you're typing in whatever website you're going to, when you press enter, you are making a get request. Okay, that's how you want to interpret that. Okay, those are called HTTP methods, but that's kind of a misleading term. It's more like the type. It's a type of request. Okay, so it's a get request because I'm going to the home page on the browser, and that's a get request. Don't worry about all this stuff. Really what matters is line 13. On line 13, what's happening?
You're rendering the mustache,
Which one?
the all we have home.
The home, right. So we're rendering the home template, home mustache template. What does RES mean? Response. So when you see RES, dot whatever, that's sort of the end of the request response cycle. That's here's your answer. Here's your response. right? So if there's anything that comes after that, that's off. Something's off there. Like that's the end of the request response cycle. Like here's the answer to your request. In this case, what is the answer to the request? The home template, correct. And where do we find that? Views and then home.mustache. So if you open this up, you're going to see a big chunk of HTML. A couple hundred lines, maybe 200. Yep, 190. Okay. What you don't see are the double curly braces of the Mustache templating engine. In other words, there is no dynamic rendering going on here. This is a static file. This is what we call hard-coded. So in other words, even though the templating engine can render data dynamically, right now we're not taking advantage of any of that. Okay? Which means tonight's job is to do that. That's why I took all that stuff out. Okay? Does that make sense? So this is a hard-coded, what's called a static website. It's just going to be the same every time. Obviously, John F. Kennedy's not looking for a job, and we're not going to all have the same resume showing John F. Kennedy, right? That's not the idea. So our job tonight is going to be to make this dynamic using the Mustache templating engine. All right? So let's get started on that. First thing I'm going to do is use a partial for the head tag. Technically, I don't have to do this because we only have one page, so like the partials don't serve as much of a purpose. But I'm going to do it anyway, just so you understand to do it. And also, just get this out of the way, kind of. It's just in the way, right? So before I go ahead and do that, who can remind me what a partial is?
It holds a block of code.
You got it, a block of HTML. So let's grab this block of HTML right here. Actually, I'll just grab it all the way to the top. Everything inside the head tag, just cut it. Okay. And then head over to the partials directory and open up the head.mustache partial. And there's a bunch of stuff already in here. Just remove it. I should have removed it. And paste in what you had. Yeah, and there's stuff already in there which I should have removed. I just forgot. So just remove it and then paste in what you had from the home page.
Is there a go back feature? Because I deleted instead of copying it.
There should be an undo.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
undo.
the same thing.
I don't know.
What's command? Command Z.
Then what to
The head.mustache file, and there's already stuff in there, which again I just forgot to remove it. So just go ahead and remove all the stuff from the head.mustache and paste in what you had from before, from the home page. Yes, we're just moving text from point A to point B. Okay, and then go back to the home.mustache, and I'm going to run the dev server. npm run dev. Okay, and you'll see I'm running the dev server now. If I go back to localhost 3000, you're going to see it looks all messed up. Okay, so obviously this is not good. Like it's all messed up. Can anyone see why we lost all that styling?
Well, we're not, we don't have the curly braces to pull.
Yeah,
that.
I didn't use the partial, right? So we just put that back in. So double curly brace, greater than sign, I think, and then head. So now we're going to use the partial, otherwise why did we do it? And just like Rashid said, that represents a chunk of code. That's not one line, that's more like 20 lines or whatever the head mustache file is.
So those curly braces will always point towards another mustache file, or they don't?
No, when you use that little caret symbol, then that's what it does. But without the caret symbol, it's a very different thing. We're going to get into all that tonight. Okay, so then when I reload, it should like restore the UI. And it's worth pointing out why all that happens, because if I open up the head partial, you'll see down here in the bottom we have a couple of link imports, and these are CSS files, excuse me. And that's where all the styling and colors and UI, all that stuff is set in there. So if I remove that, we lose the entire visual structure of the site. That's essentially what we did, just to confirm. Okay, as we go through more and more of these workshops, we'll dig into this as well, like piece by piece, like what does all this stuff do. But for tonight, we're going to worry more about the home page and making this more dynamic. All right, so we're back in business here. That's good. If I scroll to the bottom, this is normally called a footer right here, designed by that person. Right? Normally that's its own partial as well. So just for a good measure, I'm going to put the footer in a partial file. The reason that is because if this did have like 10 pages on the site, you're going to have the same header and the same footer. That's why, on every page. That's why it's usually partial. So let's go ahead and do that just for the, just to be thorough. So I'm going to turn off the server. Click on the partials folder in your Visual Studio. Make sure it's open. Click on that and create a new file, which you can do right here. Okay, you see that right there on the upper left, new file, and then footer.mustache. Yeah, I'm trying to find ways to work around the terminal commands so that like Windows people won't get all messed up. Okay, so we have a new footer partial, which we're going to put some content in there and then use it. So before I do that, is everyone with me? Okay, so we got to find that content. So we go to the home template. It's going to be on the bottom. I think it's pretty obvious. And it's actually called a footer tag. You see that? Line 162 through 166 on my code, which is probably kind of close to where it is on your code. Okay, so that's going to be our footer partial. So copy that. Copy it. Remove it, which I guess you could have just cut it as well. And replace it with the footer partial syntax. Because we're just going to replace it with the partial instead of rendering it, all of it. And then don't forget to actually go to the footer partial and paste it in. Okay. Is everyone with me? And you see this script tag right here, lines 164 through 171? You guys see that? Yeah, it's probably not the exact same on your code, but it's going to be close. You guys see that? Yeah, I mistakenly left that behind. That shouldn't even be there. Just get rid of it. Yeah. I'm trying to keep this as clean as possible. I don't want there to be anything that's like deliberate, that's like confusing for no good reason.
Delete everything where it says like script window.
All of that. You see what I've highlighted? Yeah, that's got to go. I just forgot to get rid of it. Okay, good. So if I run the dev server, npm run dev, I mean, it should look the same, right? We didn't actually make any visual changes. We just moved some files around, right? So it should look the same. All right. How are we doing so far? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
In the home
Mustache,
Uh-huh.
down below where you put the footer,
Yes.
is there a reason why you specifically put it right there?
Well, that's where it was before. So like here in the actual UI, like before I removed anything, like this chunk of code is the footer.
Also, essentially that's like a tag.
Yeah, I'm just replacing it. I'm just swapping it out from, you know. So we want to get rid of that and use the footer partial, and then just get rid of this, which shouldn't have been there all the time. Okay, and then make sure what you see is still the same, right? And then now let's actually start using you know, the actual templating engine for its designated purpose, right? So, you know, going all the way back to the top, we obviously have John Kennedy and 35th president and the image right here, right? So that's going to be this section right here, right? And that's all the way up on top. You guys see that? And so, you know, normally you would replace it with your name and all that stuff, but we want to use the templating engine here. So if we go back to the index route, one thing that's important to understand is that on line 13, the render command also provides you implicitly a home JSON data object if you want to use it. You don't have to, but if you want to, it's provided to you. To be clear, that's a Turbo thing, not an Express thing. Okay? In order to use that in Express, you have to like set it all up, which takes a while. So that's like a Turbo, like little convenience feature. Okay? The only thing you have to remember is that the name of the template has to match up with the name of the configuration file, the JSON file in the pages directory. So in pages, you'll see we have two configuration files. Home, which is the home configuration, and the global, which is that applies to every page. Okay? The home.json file is just what's called a JSON object, and JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. Okay, that's probably one of the top 3 most important terms you're gonna have to like understand. Is basically it's how in the not even the JavaScript world, like just the general web world, data is passed back and forth in the form of JSON. Okay, and JSON is kind of like the appearance of it kind of makes its function obvious, like it's just key value pairs. Okay, so here we have key value, right? I could also say name and then Dan, right? Or let's say first name Dan, comma, last name, and then Quan. So now I have a key value pair, first name, last name, right? And that matches up with the data I want to use, right? Oh, by the way, you may have noticed the server is still running. Every time I make changes, it'll like reload the changes. Okay. In the template, the page data is passed to the template under the key page. So here's what that means. It'll make sense when we start using it. So the home JSON is the configuration file that pertains to the home page. It like matches. You know, they're like partners, right? In this template, we have a data object called page, which has a first name and a last name value. Okay, that's how that works. So if I do home, I get rid of this. I have those double curly braces, right? That means I'm using a mustache placeholder or handlebars, basically the same thing. I could do page and then first name. And now I'm referencing the page JSON object passed into the render. Okay? So if I reload, now it says Dan. Right? Of course, I want to show my full name, so I do a space and then another curly brace and then page, last name. And that's how you use the templating engine to render data rather than just hard-coded text. So now if I reload, I should see Dan Quan. Certainly wasn't the 35th president. So we need data for this. right? So we go back to home JSON because we're on the home template. So we need to update the home JSON configuration file for the data to pass through. So here, I do comma, and then occupation. Software engineer. Now the JSON format is very particular in certain ways. It's a little bit more picky than like JavaScript in general. These have to be double quotation marks. Okay, so I couldn't do something like this. But that you see why it shows up red? Like that's the reason why. It's the compiler's telling me that's not valid JSON. Okay, so make sure you understand those little things. Okay, so if I head back to the home.mustache, I can now get rid of that 35th president and type in what? What do I type in here? Yeah, exactly. Double curly braces and then page dot, what do I call it? Occupation. Right. And that will render the data from the JSON file. So if I reload that, I now have software engineer.
Can I see the home JSON page again?
I might want to capitalize this.
In home JSON, you have to
Okay, so we have a little bit of dynamic data now, right? So that's good. So we have like this part dynamically rendered. Obviously, we want to work on the image. We'll get to that in a few minutes. We'll get back to that probably in about 10 minutes. But for now, let's continue updating text. That's like easier to understand right now. Okay, so let's not worry about these social media icons yet. Let's head over to the About section right away. Okay, so that's a few more steps down the template. So if you scroll down slowly until you see the About section. Right here, after the interests, it's right here. For me, it's line 71. It's probably somewhere around there for you. Okay. How are we doing? Good. So if you look at the About section, there's actually 3 pieces of data that you want to define in the JSON file. There's the actual word about, right? There's the text underneath, which is obviously you want that to be dynamic. And then there's the icon to the left of about. Those are all things that you might want to be configurable. For now, we're just going to worry about the header, the about header, and the text underneath. Maybe you want to say meet Dan, right? Or about Dan, or, you know, something like that, rather than just about all the time, right? So what you want to do, the reason I'm pointing out that this is sort of a group, that's what the main point I was trying to articulate there, is that that's a group of data, you know, the header, the text, and whatever, the icon. So I'm pointing that out because we want to group that data in the JSON file. Okay, we want to make a group out of it. Okay. So if we go to the home JSON, you know, we don't want to just keep on doing key value pairs because it's going to be hard to keep track of stuff. So I'm going to create a key value pair called section 1, and that's not going to be a JSON. That's not going to be text. Excuse me. That's going to be another JSON object. Okay, so we are now nesting JSON objects. Okay, these are called nested objects. simply putting a JSON object inside of another JSON object. Okay, and right now the most important thing is the key, the name that we're calling it, which is section_1. And if you recall, we had three pieces of data. It was the header, the text, and the icon. We're not going to worry about the icon. We're just going to go with header and text. Okay, so those are the keys that belong in the second JSON object, the nested object. So header and text. Header. I'm going to go with hello for now. And text. My name is. Okay. In a lot of JSON objects, you're going to see like nesting like this all the time. So you want to get used to it. Very often the nesting goes pretty deep. So you might go like 5, 6 levels deep. Okay, happens all the time. But can you guys see kind of the logic going on here? We're putting an object inside of an object. And don't forget the top level, it's called section_1. So, going back to the home mustache, we have the about text right here, line 72 for me. So the whole purpose of this is to get rid of the hard coding there, right? So we get rid of that. And we open up the mustache syntax. And don't forget, all the data stored in the page object, that's for our purposes, that's our home.json. So page, and then now we reference the nested object, section_1, and then header. And you can just do that forever. You can add more and more nested objects. It's not a good idea to go too deep, but like a typical project, maybe 5, 6 levels deep is about what you should expect. So if I go back to the home JSON, you'll see that I'm referencing section_1 header. And for in my case, it's hello exclamation mark, right? So if I reload the local host, what should I see? Hello, instead of about, right? Right. That means the data is being rendered from the JSON object. Okay, so I'm going to remove that exclamation mark. And I'm going to say meet Dan. And notice how I don't have to change anything here, because it's just a placeholder, right? Whatever you put in the JSON object is what goes here, is what shows up here. Okay. So if I reload, it should now say meet Dan. And we still haven't taken care of this. So if we go back to the home JSON, you'll remember that there's another key that we haven't used called text inside the section_1 object. So if I go back to the home.mustache, all this stuff here inside this p tag, right? That's what we want to remove, and we want to replace it with the JSON reference. So here is the p tag. I just removed all that placeholder text. And we do, again, double curly brace, page, section_1_ text, right? And now we're injecting our placeholders. So if I reload, it should say what? My name is Dan. Right. Yep.
Go back to the mustache.
Yep. Right here is where that happened, right here.
Section.
So to be clear, we're right now using the Mustache templating engine for its intended purpose. Like this is what it's for, okay? Whereas when you downloaded the template tonight, like when we first started, we weren't taking advantage of it at all. It was just all static text. Okay, so basically so far this has been a session on Mustache templating. And all templating engines more or less work this way. The only things that are different are like the syntax. So like instead of the double curly braces, it might be something else. I mean, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but they all kind of work in this fashion. Okay, how are we doing? Okay, and the last thing I'm going to work on for the, I mean not tonight, but like for the home.json page is this guy right here, the icon. We got to change that, right? So we did this before. We need to download an image or grab an image from whatever folders, wherever we keep that stuff, and then upload it and then place it in there, right? So I'm going to just grab an image from the interwebs. I'm going to be LeBron James. LeBron wants to be me when he grows up, right? Somehow I doubt that. Yeah, this is fine. Okay, so I'm just grabbing a random image off the internet, and then that's going to be my profile icon. Oh, this is not going to work. Let's find other ones. Cool. Okay, that'll do. I'm just going to change the name of that to LeBron. And then I'm going to use that as my profile image. So you may recall when we did this before, a couple sessions back, this might have been the Saturday session, the Turbo hosting environment provides you like a file upload system that you can use. It's like another feature that makes this part of the process a lot easier. Otherwise, you'd have to set all that up too. Setting up a file storage system, typically through a third-party provider, or literally just doing it raw, which would typically be done through S3, Amazon S3, or like Cloudflare, or something like that. Setting all that up on its own is another, like, that's like a 2-month course on its own. It's like basically Turbo just gives you that out of the box. So if you go to your account on Turbo, specifically the management console for your site, you can click on file storage, and it's empty, right? Because we just created the site. So if I click on upload file, you can just grab the file you're going to use for this purpose, and just upload that, and it just gives you the storage mechanism for that. All right.
How did you send the image again?
I just found an image and then I just dragged it onto my desktop.
Okay.
I mean, also if you just have your own images already, that's fine. Like it, you know, I just found something that was nice and easy. All right, and then if I click on the image that I just uploaded, you'll see the same image now on the Turbo. Well, technically, I'm using a Google hosting for the image, but like it's all connected to Turbo. So that's going to be our image URL, this guy right there. Now you may be wondering, why don't I just use the actual image from the internet itself? Right? You could do that. That would work. That's called hot linking, when you're taking an image from another website and like putting it in your own. But the reason I'm using this service right here is because it gives me lots of manipulation capability out of the box, right? So you notice how this image is not a perfect square. It's more rectangular, right? Well, that's easy to fix. If I need a perfect square, I just do equals S and then 220-C, and it gives me a perfect square version of that. The -C is what makes that happen. Okay, the 220 means it should be 220 pixels in dimension. Okay, so if I just did 220 without the -c, it'll just be a smaller version of the same image. Okay, and the max size is 2048, I think, 2048, and that's like the biggest I'm going to get. And if I do a -c on that, it'll give me a perfect square version of that. Okay, this makes life a lot easier when I'm putting together like an image for like thumbnails, where you don't need a huge image. So a thumbnail might be like 64C, like that. That's a thumbnail size image, right? And you want to do things like that so that you're not like wasting bandwidth. And you want to cut down on image sizes where you can, you know, where it's not, you don't need the big image. So one of like the biggest rookie mistakes I see is like when people have like a gallery of images that are like all kind of small, but they're all original size. So it's like 5,000 across by 4,000 down. Those are like 8 megabyte images when you only need like 350 by 200, right? And that's like a pretty amateur mistake. So things like that. This is in place to give you tools to prevent that. Okay, so it's one of those like hidden tells that where you can kind of pick up like, oh, this person hasn't been developing very long. Like he's still making those mistakes. Those are rookie mistakes. Okay, so let's get rid of that right there, and let's grab the original size image and just copy that. Just highlight the entire thing and copy it. Okay, well, let's head back to our code. And we need to use that in our home JSON configuration file. So home JSON. This is not in section 1, right? This is on the right side, so it should be on top. So I'm going to create a new key called img profile _ profile. And then I'm going to paste in that long address. And now I have a reference to the image inside my code. Okay. Now we haven't used it, so if I go back to my home.mustache, my home template, I want to go back up to the top where that image is actually being rendered, and that's on line 11 for me. And if I swing to the right, you'll see this placeholder image right here. This is the original image that's currently being rendered, but look at that parameter at the end, equals to S120C. Right, so we're cropping it already. Okay, what I'm saying, the reason I'm pointing that out is we don't want to lose that. We want to make sure our image there is always a perfect square, 120 across and 120 down. That's what we're guaranteeing right here. Okay, so right away we're taking advantage of the image manipulation properties. So in other words, we want to get rid of everything before the 120C. We want to keep that. And we want to do curly brace. Now here's like a weird mustache thing worth remembering. Whenever you're rendering an actual HTTP address, you want to use 3 curly braces and not 2. Technically it'll work with 2, it's just better with 3. And for now I'm not going to explain the difference, but we will eventually get to it. Okay, so in the home JSON, that key is underneath the page and then img _ profile. So now I'm rendering the image from the home mustache, home JSON configuration object. So if I reload, hopefully I'll see this time, instead of this guy, I see hopefully LeBron James. And there he is. Now notice how the image is like already well proportioned. You know, there's no weird distortion or skewing going on. If I did something like this, if I removed this parameter right here, don't do this, just watch me, just remove that. Now remember, the image itself is a rectangle, not a perfect square, right? That I deliberately downloaded like a rectangular image. So if I don't crop it, look what happens. Like it comes out all messed up, right? Because it's not proportioned for what the template or the HTML like sort of allocated. So then what often happens here with like sort of beginner web devs, people who don't have like an image processor, not a processor, but like an image hosting service in place, is like they have to like make various versions of the same image. So it's like let's upload the original, let's upload a thumbnail, let's upload like the like, and that becomes really cumbersome, right? So this allows us to just have one version that we can manipulate for all purposes. Okay, another sort of turbo convenience thing. This is a turbo thing that I built in because I found myself pulling my hair out, doing exactly that, creating thumbnail versions and middle versions and small versions and big versions, and I was like, screw all this. I have to make this part work because it makes my life a lot easier. So we just put that guy back. So equals S120C hyphen C. And again, the hyphen C stands for perfect square. Okay, so now it looks nice and well proportioned. You could do just 120, and it'll work. It'll still just look a little weird. You see? It just came out a little strange, right? I mean, I don't know. Someone might end up just going with that, but it would be pretty obvious that wasn't the original intention. So when like if I get like a resume or someone submits like a website like that, I just know right away this he's being sloppy. Like he didn't take enough time to fix that small problem, which means how is he going to approach my work, right? No good. Got to get that out. So there's all these little things you got to be like very considerate of. I mean, depending on like the job and whatnot. I mean, not everyone's like that, but that's how I am. When I see small mistakes like that in your own code, it's like, hey, this is your code, right? Like you should be proud of this work. This should be your best foot forward. And you still doing things like that. Then what are you going to do on my code, right? So not an option. So we do -C. Make sure we're back in business with that. That looks nice and well proportioned. We left this guy behind. That's hard-coded as the original template value, John Kennedy. So we forgot about that. So we need to get rid of that. And what should I put in here instead? What? Sorry?
That's our information. I mean, you put
Yeah, well, like literally.
yeah.
To tell me the actual literal characters I should type next.
LeBron James
LeBron
pick.
James.
Because then I'd just be hard-coding LeBron James.
Oh yeah, it would be first
Wouldn't you?
name,
First name.
first name.
No.
I mean, I just typed what you told me to type.
So the brackets,
Okay,
I'm gonna clear the whole thing out.
thank you.
Another, then it's gonna be page dot, first name, close, and then close brackets, and then open two new brackets. I mean, open another bracket, then it's gonna be, page dot last name, and close brackets.
Cool. And then when I reload, use of factor, you're close, like 95%. If I look at the code, look at what we actually get. Do you see it? Right, so what do we forget? A space, that's all.
Oh,
Okay. Little things like that. Got to get little things like that. Okay. Good. All right. Great. So now we have the image taken care of. Did everyone kind of get the image part? Like understand the mechanics there?
I understand it, but my image is jacked.
It just doesn't look good. Well, let's fix that. I mean, the system is in place to address exactly that. So let's make sure we get that before we move on. So I'm going to pause the video. Who else got it working? Oh, good. So it was a relatively smooth run. Okay. So now we took care of this whole panel right here, and we got this part taken care of. This part. So right now, I think is a good time for a deploy. So this is what I meant by like you want to get used to the cycle of like testing locally, making sure it works, and then deploying, making sure everything works on staging as well. So I'm going to run a quick deploy. So for now, don't do it. Just watch me. Because I'll just tell you right now it's not going to work, and I'll tell you why, and then we'll fix it. So. Okay, so I'm going to load the staging environment, the live site, and it's not going to show up right. Like all the stuff is gone now. And let me explain why. Because that page matching feature, the template and the template JSON file, again, don't forget, that's a Turbo thing. Okay, it's not an Express thing. It's just a convenient thing I built into Turbo to make life easier. So what I have to do to make sure those changes take effect is I have to do Turbo page and then the name of whatever page I just worked on, which is what? Home. So Turbo page home will then update the page configuration file on the actual server, which didn't work here, so I got another problem now. Okay, let me track this down and then figure out what's going on. But try it on your end, see if it works on your end.
Can you go back to, what was it, the page, Turbo, when you're creating that page for the file to deploy?
Turbo page home.
Yes.
Yeah, oh yeah. Okay, so I just had to do a quick redeploy, and that confirmed that the actual updated pages are working. Glitch in the system, I'll figure out when I get home why it didn't update right away. But the bottom line is our updated home JSON is now showing up on the actual staging environment. And Yusuf, you confirmed on your end the same for you. Nicole, same for you?
After I
Okay.
did the turbo deploy a second time.
Okay. Oh, so did you need 2 attempts?
No,
Just one? What about you?
Just one.
Okay, all right, I'll figure that out. Okay, but we have our data showing up properly on the remote, the staging environment as on the home, right? Local, so we're good on that. So I'm gonna go back and run the local host, npm run dev. So basically what we're doing there is just sort of a sanity check, like is everything we're doing locally gonna look the same on remote? It's a cycle you wanna get used to, like, you know, test, push, and just make sure everything is like the same up here as it is on local. So we're good to go. Okay, so I'm back on localhost now. Bless you. Okay, so we took care of this. We still have experience and projects and references and skill. We've got a lot to do. We're not going to do all this tonight, obviously. But the next thing I want to do is work on the social media and contact info, like the email, you know, your website, your LinkedIn, whatever, right? So let's take care of that. That might be pretty much it for tonight, because this stuff gets a little bit more intense, like the jobs, the projects, and things like that. Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. We'll just see how far we go. So if we go back to the code, home.mustache, right, all the way on top, and you scroll down a little bit, not too far down, for me, line 16, you'll start to see, like, you know, the email, the website, your LinkedIn, your GitHub, Twitter, all this other stuff. Obviously, not everyone is going to have all of that, right? So we have to figure out a good way to make sure we can handle that dynamically, right? So just so you get used to it, I'm going to put this in the global. I don't really have to. It doesn't really matter because there's only one page on this site. But so really the global is not necessary at all. But I just want you to get used to working with the home and the global and the other configuration files. Okay.
So putting this in home global just makes it show up on all of them.
Right, but there's only one page anyway. So and also putting it in global doesn't mean that it shows up on all the pages. It means if you want to, you could have it show up on all the pages if you choose to. That data is available to you on every page. Whereas the home JSON data, it only is available on the home page. I think that's pretty intuitive, right? So let's head over to global JSON, which is also empty. I'm going to create a new key here called contact, or let's just call it links because they're not really all contact. So, and the links will be a nested JSON object. Okay, and we're going to set up a JSON entry for each one of those. Each one of these here. Okay, so we have email, website, LinkedIn, whatever. So let's just do one for now. Okay, so let's have an entry for email. And that's going to be another JSON object. So now we're nesting 2 levels deep. Okay, and you may be wondering, like, why are we nesting an entire object? It's just an email address, right? What's the big deal? It's just a string. What's the big deal? Well, it's actually a little bit more than that. If you look at the actual email entry, there are a few distinguishing characteristics. Number one, the class right here is different from everything else. Number two, you see where this FA envelope, right? That's what dictates this little icon right here. That's called Font Awesome. Font Awesome is an icon library that like everyone uses. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Okay. The href on this anchor tag is also different based on the fact that it's an email. And then finally, the email address. So it's actually, I think, like 4 pieces that we gotta think about. So that one entry consists of 4 attributes that we have to determine on the render. Okay, so let's go through them again. There's class, the Font Awesome icon, the href, and the actual value. So in this entry, we're going to have the class, the icon, the href, or let's just call it link. That's a little bit more intuitive. Or no, URL. Sorry, I'm just making it up as I go. And then the actual value. Those are the 4 characteristics we need to determine for each social media icon row. So the class is right here. It's just called email, so that's easy, right? So right here, you see that line 18? So it's just email. The icon is this text right here. You can just grab that and move it over into the value field. Okay. The link is what's inside that href attribute. Just put that right there, or the URL, excuse me. And finally, the value is your actual email. Okay, so we have our entry for our email attributes this time in the global, but that's just so you kind of see how it works in different configuration files. So what we want to do now is go back to the template, the home template, and actually insert those JSON keys rather than the hard-coded text that's currently there. So we go back to the home template, and we just go back to the beginning, and we do, well, it's actually not page this time, because remember, we're using the global key, the global JSON object, which is not the home page. So instead of just doing the same thing over again, we now have to reference the global object. And every page gets that. That's what makes it the global object. Okay? And then inside the global object, we have a links key. Right? That's what we set up. And then inside the links object, we have an email object. And now we've drilled down to the actual values we want. So this is .class. Sometimes people call this drilling down, like we're drilling down to where we need to go. Okay, so what I would do next is just copy this part, global.links.email, because I know we're going to need that same sort of key path for the remaining attributes, the other three, which we have not updated yet. Okay, and don't forget to save it.
Can you go back to your global JSON?
Yeah. Okay, so now we're nesting 2 layers deep. Okay, you want to get used to this thought process. This is very common. Like nested JSON objects everywhere, just something you're going to have to get used to. Okay, so here we reference the global.links.email.class property. So we're drilling down to a couple layers of JSON. So again, it may seem confusing, but this is typical. It's very normal. So then we have to go back to global JSON to see the next one. It's called icon, right? So we replace the icon here with the icon attribute of the JSON entry. And that's why you were asking about the. So then, if you kind of see where that's going, you can piece together the next two, right? So here, if I get rid of that, what should I replace it with? URL, good. Because that's the value that we assigned here on line 6.
So would you use 3 there or not? 3 braces?
Is that a full HTTP? No.
No, okay.
If it was like HTTP ... whatever, then that's correct. And then last but not least, value. Okay, and when I reload, I'm just going to run the dev server. It's still there, which is good. That's what we want. I'm going to change some of the values to my own stuff. So go back to global.json, and that was on staging anyway. So here is the, I just changed the names. Okay, so here is the email from global.json, right? So it's being successfully rendered from the JSON data. Okay, and really the important thing to really kind of take away here is how to work with data within the Mustache templating engine. That's really what we're doing here, is understanding how data is manipulated and accessed via the Mustache templating engine, which again is pretty much the same as handlebars. and they all kind of work in similar fashion. So every templating engine is somewhat a variation of what we're doing right now. Okay?
Let me see the, home.
Yep. This line's a bit long. I'm gonna try and get it all in one. I don't know if that's, how do I do that? I think it's right here. I don't know if that's any better, but
So much better.
is that better? Okay, that's the whole line. That's everything I just adjusted. I find that hard to kind of read, but if it helps. So if you got that working, get started on the next entry, the website. Okay, so you go back to your global.json, and inside the links key we have email, and we filled it out. So then the next one would be website, and it should be consisting of the same values. So inside the website object, there should be a class key, an icon key, a URL key, and a value key. But the only differences are the actual values of those fields. Okay, so if you got this working, get started on that. See if you can get the next one working. And we're not going to do all of them, because once you do 2 or 3, I think you can kind of figure out the rest. But let's try to get at least 2 or 3 in place. Okay, so the email tab right here is now referencing the data from the global JSON object. We want to do that for all of them, right? We're only going to do 1 or 2 more, because once you do the first couple, you can kind of figure out the rest. So for this one, this is for the website contact. So right here, this is the website one. Actually, this is on staging, so here's localhost. So right here, right? So we want to create a new entry in the links object of global.json. So don't forget this comma right here. And then,
Oh my goodness, that was right.
oh yeah,
Oh my God, that's what it was.
very easy to forget.
Oh.
And then,
Somebody else dealing with that?
yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That's what I was.
Oh, it was
I created everything else.
What, the comma?
Yeah, the
comma.
comma.
I couldn't get it.
Oh my God, I'm killing him.
oh, I'm sorry, I should have checked on people's code. I'm sorry about that. I didn't think that would be messing people up. So yeah, like I was saying earlier, the JSON formatting is like very specific. And if you miss like one thing, the whole thing breaks down. By the way, that's kind of how most of coding generally is anyway. So you want to get used to that mindset. Like even if your casing is off, like if you have an uppercase letter where it's supposed to be lowercase, it's going to mess things up. So like if I did something like this, that's going to mess things up. And like you just have to be that specific in coding. So just get used to that thought process, because the sooner you sort of adapt to that way of thinking, the easier these things are going to be. So here we have our new entry for website. And again, notice how the keys here are all the same, right? Class, icon, URL, and value. So we can go back to the Mustache template now and just take those values and insert them into the global.json. So that's the class. This is the icon, the URL, HTTP, HTTPS, www. Whatever, and then here I'm just going to say website. Okay, so rather than have it like show the address, it's just going to say website. Okay, and then we can just insert those values. So global links. This time it's website and then class. Right.
Put the email in. Website and class.
And then we just go all the way through and populate the rest of the values, right? So here it's going to be global links, website, and then icon, and so forth and so on, right? Now this is a full URL here. right here. So it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Again, you don't have to do that, but it's just better if you do. And then over here, it's dot value. Right, so now we've fully populated the contents of that row with the JSON data, right? So we can just reload, and here it says website. See that? So the data is successfully being pulled from the global JSON object. Now, if you recall, the whole reason we're even doing this is because like maybe we don't want all of them, right? Like maybe I don't have a Dribble account, maybe I don't have an Instagram account, right? I don't want to have all this on there. So what we want to do here is use conditional rendering on Mustache. So in other words, there's a way you can tell Mustache to hide something if you don't want it to show up, based on what's called a Boolean value, a true or false value. You with me? So here on global JSON, on the email key, I can just add a new key called show or hide. And that's going to be true or false. So true means I want it to show up. Now notice that's not a string. I just literally typed in the word true. That's called a Boolean. So that can only be one of two values, true or false. Okay, and then same thing for website. Just copy and paste it in. By setting it to true, we're saying we always want this to show up.
You said this is conditional rendering.
Yeah, we haven't actually done that yet, but we're starting that process. And then here on the home.mustache, right now if I reload, like nothing changed, it's still the same, right? We want to render these two rows, the only ones where I've inserted template stuff. Those are the only two that are dynamic right now. We want to render those two conditionally. Okay, so here's how that looks. For now, don't copy, just watch, because it's going to be a little confusing at first. So we have a mustache conditional that looks like this. We put a hashtag and then show or hide, and then a slash right there. This sort of encasing, whatever you want to call that, like see how it's embedded inside those two, like that. Think of this as the opening and the closing. That means this will only show up if the show or hide value is set to true. That's conditional. So right now it is set to true, right? So the email icon will show up, right? Except it didn't. So what did I do wrong here? Oh, wait. So, because there's no class, I went too far in my nesting. Okay. So typical typo, et cetera, et cetera. By the way, right here, you know, like I make mistakes. You just saw a couple. I made a couple tonight. Always assume it's your fault. Okay, so one of the biggest rookie mistakes I see is some people think like something's wrong with the system. I guarantee it's something you did. Okay. When it gets to a point where like something's wrong with the system, you're dealing at super high levels of stuff. Where like the system is so new and cutting edge, there might be something wrong with the system. But we're not in that category. It's going to be a while, right? At this level, where things have been so heavily tested by millions of people, we're the mistake, not the system. So as soon as I made a mistake, I was like, what did I do? Like, what stupid mistake did I make? Let me just find it. And this is certainly a stupid mistake. I may have made another one, but certainly that's one. So hopefully now it'll work as intended, and there's the email, right? So that is now showing as it should, because the show or hide Boolean is set to true. So now if I go back to the global JSON and say, for now, we're just going to hide that guy. You see how I set it to false? Now when I reload, now the email's gone as it's supposed to be. Okay? And that's how the conditional rendering in Mustache works. This is sort of the point I was trying to get to wrap up wrap up the evening. So it kind of gives you a good foundation to fill out the rest of this, right? So if I go back here to the home mustache, I can wrap the other one also in the conditional render. And don't forget, this isn't email, this is website. Just don't forget to make that minor adjustment. And now that's going to be conditionally rendered. So I can, right now I can just check it to see if it still shows up, but then I can just toggle this to false. And then this website link will also go away, right? And if I want them both, I just do true, true, and that'll restore both of those. And so that way you can go through all the fields, or you can, I mean, it's your work, right? You can even add more, right? Maybe there are more social media networks that you felt that should be included here. Like for example, I don't think I even put Facebook on this one. So, you know, that's kind of a big one, right? So maybe you want to add more, right? And then have them conditionally rendered. And that'll make it easier to decide which ones to show and which ones not to show. Okay? So this is how the conditional rendering works in Mustache. And so, you know, tonight was sort of a good overview of like the basics of Mustache. There's a little bit more that I'll probably get to on Monday. Today's Wednesday, yeah, so Monday. So there, I mean, there's more to it, but for the most part, we covered it pretty comprehensively. I would say we covered about 70% of what we need to know in Mustache. And then the rest is just practice and using it and getting used to all the mistakes and things like I made today. Little mistakes like that. So we'll do a little bit more on Monday to make sure we kind of wrap up the key concepts of Mustache rendering. And like I said, the rest is practice. I wouldn't call any of this like difficult or rocket science. You know, programming gets much harder than this. But really where things get difficult here are like the little details, like missing a comma, and then that messes you up for an hour, right? And that's kind of like where you got to get those bad habits out of your system first, so well, we're actually making decent progress now. Like we can get better and better as time goes on, and those little things won't trip you up as much. And that's what I was saying in the first week, way back in the beginning of February, like just keep coming, keep doing it, and all these little mistakes will like kind of slowly wash out of your system. And then every workshop we do, we'll get more and more. We'll get through more and more and more. Okay. So to give you kind of a preview of what Monday is going to entail. So I mean, we didn't cover the entire website. Far from it. I don't think we even got to half. Right. We didn't touch on the experience, the projects, references, etc. There's a reason for that. That kind of data is very different. That data is even more dynamic than what we're showing here. You know, the experience basically is your job history, and like that could be like 10 jobs or however many. And like it's also like going to change a lot, right? It's well, hopefully not a lot, but like as you or like better example would be projects, right? That should be a pretty active part of your website. With data like that, where things are more dynamic, I guess is the best way to put it. Let me draw a more obvious distinction. Your name, you know, my name, pretty set for life, right? I don't think it's going to change. First name, at least, if you get married or whatever. But so that this is more that kind of data. The kind of data we worked on today was more that kind of data, like your name, your age. Well, no, your age will change. You know, your occupation, like I'm a software engineer, whatever, right? That's the kind of data we worked on today. First name, last name, email. You know, your email might change, but it's not going to be one of those things where it's like where you expect it to change a lot over time. However, your projects, right, you do expect that to change a lot over time, or at least you should. Your references, you should be building up references as you go about your career, and that should build up over time, right? That's more dynamic data. That's going to be the database-driven data, okay? So this is where we have to start interacting with the database to make queries to fetch data and then inject that into the template. Okay, kind of like we did with the blog posts on the last project is very similar, but this one is much more database-driven because in the previous project, we only had one sort of database object. It's a blog post, and that's it, right? You with me? So here we have a lot more. We have you know, your job history, right? So each one of those is a job in your past. Your project history, right? Your references, and skills and interests. Right? I don't know if I want to put this in the database, but the first three definitely. Right? So once we get through some of the remaining Mustache stuff on Monday, we're going to get into how to deal with the database on a more intricate level than we did in the blog workshop, where it was sort of handed to you on a platter. Like this time, we're going to actually like start building some of that out. Okay? But between now and Monday, it's plenty of time, right? I want you to go through the rest of these social network icons and get all that working. Get that practice in. Get your reps in during the long stretch in between. I think the 2-day-a-week cycle is going to be good because then between Wednesday and Sunday gives you plenty of time to kind of go through all the stuff, absorb it, do it again, really get it, let it sink in. But take advantage of it, okay? Take advantage of that time so that on Monday we can kind of hit the ground running, okay? And obviously whatever bugs or errors you come across, we can cover that on Monday too. All right? Cool. All right, thanks for coming, and I'll see you on Monday.